All right, today we're going to dive into something you've asked for, our viewers, and that is an analysis that's a little bit deeper on a project called Celo, kind of pronounced with the T and the C together. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to Tech Path. Today we're going to jump into it with Dr. Markus Franke, who is one of the the originators of what's happening over at the Celo Foundation and the project itself. Welcome into the show today. We appreciate you stopping in.
Thank you, Paul. I'm very excited to be here. Very excited, as always, to talk about Celo. And yeah, you pronounce it quite right. It's a Esperanto word for purpose.
There you go, exactly. I want to get into, so you've got a lot of background in finance, economics. First person I've met and had on the show that has a PhD in quantitative finance. So obviously, you're in the right industry, at least, with cryptocurrency and blockchain technology as it's going forward. When you looked at kind of in the process of building out and creating the concept of Celo, what was the main core and mission for what you guys were trying to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you said, I did work in research. I'm an economist by training. I spent quite some time in studying economics and working in that field. And from the start, I think, and this is also the first sentence in the intro of the white paper, we thought about blockchain technology in a way that currently and back then and still today has two big barriers to large-scale adoption. One is, of course, ease of use. It is sometimes very complicated to use. And one is actually the volatility we still see today in the markets. And from the start, we wanted to change that. We wanted to build something that makes Celo more inclusive for everybody to use. And to build something that can actually help with building a more inclusive financial system that then also creates conditions for prosperity for everyone.
So I like the projects that really kind of take on these global missions of trying to really kind of shift not only the finance industry, but also just the ecosystem in which technology is being, either adopted by consumers or large masses, because the last shift we actually saw this occur in was the internet. When we saw the early stages of the internet, most of it was in first world countries. It barely made its way into what we saw as emerging countries and emerging markets. Now, of course, that's different, but blockchain seems to be on that same track, but only growing much faster. I was looking at some recent data that actually had blockchain growing at about 4 times the rate in which the internet adoption was, mainly because of mobile. Tell me why mobile is so important in the Celo ecosystem and why go that direction versus some of the directions that other blockchain projects have gone.
Yes, and that is a perfect question. Celo is a mobile-first blockchain. It is fully open source. And when we talk about Celo, we always mention these 3 large points. 1, mobile, 2, open, and the third one, real. And mobile basically means that Celo is mobile first. So why did we when starting to work on Celo, why did we focus on mobile? So when you look at, for example, today's Ericsson mobility report, you can see that already today there are 8 billion smartphones in the world. One interesting example I've read today actually was that there are per capita 2.7 smartphones in Brazil, for example. So that is a country where people already have more than one smartphone. And not only the number of mobile devices is increasing quite fast, also the connectivity is increasing in all regions of the world. So there's only a very few regions where internet connectivity is still very slow. So with increased connectivity, I think a smartphone is a great device for much broader adoption. And especially, and I think this is interesting for a open source platform that has this mission to increase financial inclusion and to build out a system that is more inclusive for everyone out there, is that also in countries where people don't have good access to traditional financial institutions, to banks, to lending and borrowing institutions, to all these things, people have most of the times access to smartphones. And this is great news for us because we can use the smartphone to then give people access to a number of financial applications. And this, the second word in this mobile, open and real storyline, open meaning Celo is fully open source. Fully open source means it is permissionless. Everyone can build own applications on top of Celo. Everyone can link existing applications into Celo. It is compatible with many other blockchains out there. And therefore, basically, this combination of being open source and having many different things being built on there and being focused on mobile allows then for real use cases, for payments, for sending transactions across barriers, across borders, for saving, for lending and borrowing. All these things can now happen actually on a blockchain that is now easier to use and more accessible. And I know that now was a long answer, but just one example what is possible already today. So already today, if I have your phone number, I can send you a Celo Dollar just by having your phone number.
Right.
And it arrives within 5 seconds. It settles within 5 seconds because the block time on Celo is 5 seconds. And I basically can use, for example, the Valora app, which is a wallet on Celo, which is linked to my phone book. I can send Celo Euro or Celo Dollar to anyone in my phone book, and they receive it within 5 seconds. And then the gas fees, the transaction fees for this transaction are super low. They are less than a basis point on a dollar. So especially for sending transactions across border, this is also much cheaper. And therefore, I think mobile is the way to go for the Celo ecosystem. There's also now decentralized finance or DeFi applications coming to mobile on Celo and so many more things. That's why we are excited about this mobile first feature on Celo.
Dr. Franke, when you look at, so there's two big questions. If you look at I'll call it the mobile ecosystem as it is today, we have some countries that have evolved into 5G and either are in current build out, mostly in Europe. We've seen a lot of adoption of 5G here in the US, just now rolling out. But with 5G kind of becoming the new global standard, will that be able to assist in general? I know it's obviously going to help Celo, but in general, do you feel like that's going to help blockchain adoption? Because I think that's the big question mark for most people. If you're going to be sending payments through a Celo app or through other, projects that have been built on Celo, the key there is getting, mass adoption to utilize it, like a Venmo, like a PayPal. Those kinds of adoption curves have to happen. Do you feel like that's going to occur with the 5G rollout?
For sure, and I think it can already happen today. And yes, you're right. I mean, we see the 5G rollout, 4G or LTE is being still rolled out in so many more countries. So basically, the times where you see 3G connectivity on a phone are in most regions of the world over. And interestingly, sometimes even here in Berlin, there are a few corners where you still see 3G, and there are so many countries in the world who are ahead and building this out faster. So Celo is mobile first because per transaction, much less data is necessary to do a transaction. So you don't have to download a whole block to your ultralight client, being your mobile phone. You only have to download a hash of the block header, and this makes basically the amount of data that you as a mobile phone user would need for a transaction 700 to 800,000 times less than on other blockchains. So basically, this technology technological advancement enables payments for sure on 5G, but already on 4G, 3G, and even slower networks, because the amount of data you need for a transaction is much less. Yeah. But on the other hand, of course, there are like applications on top of this blockchain that some of them, of course, also need data. And therefore, I think like this rollout of 5G, of course, is beneficial to this movement, to this mobile-first movement in crypto, and will bring adoption of these types of currencies and also of this technology to a much broader audience.
When you look at the unbanked regions of the world and really kind of economies that are built around the unbanked themselves, and there are many, whether it's South America, we've seen this in the continent of Africa, we've seen it even in Asia to a certain extent, where there is kind of an evolution that is starting to occur where unbanked and also even sovereign nations now moving into much more mobile level banking because they've kind of skipped over traditional ecosystems that have been built in the past by first world countries. Mobile seems to be kind of the first adoption point to really kind of take people into the banking system. With your particular project being so lightweight and also the capability of being fast, what about scalability in terms of nodes and the ability to really kind of expand the ecosystem itself to adopt just the numbers, the sheer numbers in mobile devices worldwide?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's like so many different angles to it. First of all, the unbanked, you've mentioned, around the world, people are unbanked or underbanked for so many different reasons. Either because they don't have access to a stable currency, because they live in a country with ultra high inflation, or they live in a country where they just don't have access to banking institutions, or they don't have a government-issued ID, or they are basically in countries where they are like distributed over many different islands. So there are a lot of different reasons why people don't have access to a stable currency, why people don't have access to banking, and where this technology can actually make a difference. The nice thing with this technology is it can not only make access to all this much easier, it can actually also innovate on the existing financial services. So with Celo, you have a blockchain or a decentralized platform that is smart contract enabled. So you can also have conditional payments. We now have the potential to innovate on money itself. You can, in future, see nature-backed currencies on Celo. You can have local currencies. You can have use case currencies. You can use this technology to connect devices in an Internet of Things. So it's basically the use for this is vast. And as you said, rolling this out to the different countries, to the many people around the world with their different needs. This is something that cannot be done by one project or one company, or this can only be done by a growing economy. Therefore, it's great to see that the Celo community is growing. We have now projects and developers in more than 100 countries. I think it's 113 or 14 countries of the world, thousands of developers that build many different applications. So one way to get to all these countries and get to all these communities is via open source technology, making it accessible to anyone to build their own local applications from it locally, to be able to build their businesses on top of that. The other way is also having partners that are working internationally and can actually help us to build on-ramps, off-ramps, can build connectivity, can build their own products. And I want to call out a few of them. So for example, very recently, you've probably seen that here in Germany, and this is why I'm using this as a first example, because I'm here in Berlin, Deutsche Telekom and T-Mobile announced that they are using Celo technology going forward. They have 242 million mobile clients, so they can enable their clients to do something with this. Or also Opera, the browser that has a growing adoption in many different countries, is embedding the stablecoins in its browser technology. Or also, for example, PayU is an interesting example. It's a group of merchants around the world, or a payment provider for merchants around the world, that is also enabling in future merchants to accept stablecoins. So with these growing partnerships, also of the Alliance for Prosperity, this is basically how we call this alliance of mission-aligned partners that want to use Celo technology in many different use cases. With this, we can actually roll it out. And I specifically also want to call out, for example, in this Alliance for Prosperity, the Grameen Foundation, who used Celo currencies for COVID relief payments in the Philippines. So also for charity payments, this is a technology that is very useful. But it only works with these large international partners, with a growing community of developers, with a growing community of projects that want to build their own solutions on top of it.
Yeah, I've been impressed in our research just in terms of seeing the ecosystem and its, kind of its gravitas around, one, the developers that have started to jump into it, obviously for some of the key reasons there in speed, the ability to scale, those kinds of applications. When you consider the banking system and kind of this evolution that we are in right now, though it has not taken hold too much within the major first world countries, we have seen movement in some of the emerging countries which have kind of started to kind of reposition how the banking system is going to work. And we do have, actually, we're going to have an interview with Vastbank on our show here soon, who has actually taken on crypto assets and crypto payments within their payment program within the bank itself. How quickly do you see the potential for the banking system to start to look at mobile payments, just like someone like an Ericsson or like a T-Mobile or maybe an AT&T here in the States, to where they could really kind of create a use case for their clients and customers?
I mean, also the whole banking industry, as you said, is now starting to look into this. And basically banking from two different angles. Commercial banking, for sure,
right,
because they know in many of their countries where they want to be active, people already use this technology. But they also know that also in these countries where they offer already like many services that, for example, make it very easy for me here in Berlin to pay for a coffee with my credit card or my phone, even touchless, just by having a bank account that issued its credit card. Here, this is very easy. In many countries, it is not. But for me also, it's not very easy to send you a money transfer in the US.
Sure.
If I would use this bank, it would take a few days. It would also cost significant amounts of money. And I could just send you Celo dollars or Celo euro, and it would arrive within 5 seconds. So I think even in the countries where people have great access to banking, this has a lot of potential, and therefore banks are looking into it. But also the Bank for International Settlements, central banks, they all look
right
into this because they could also benefit from this technology. And we've seen more and more central banks recently that started to look into it. And central banks, of course, have different ways how they could make use of this technology. They could issue their own central bank digital currency. They could also issue it on an existing public ledger like Celo's and make use from all these mobile first features, from these very fast transactions, while still controlling basically the currency itself. So having a technology that is open source and scalable and enables smart contracts allows for all these things. And the great thing then is that all this is interoperable. So basically different currencies on Celo are interoperable. If a central bank would launch a central bank digital currency on Celo, it would be interoperable with these existing currencies. And even more, also the broader financial industry, also insurances look into this now. An insurance contract could be an NFT, a non-fungible token that lives on a blockchain, and there could be a smart contract that triggers basically an insurance payment if a certain condition is hit. So the potential of this technology, even in the traditional financial space, is huge. And of course, this space moves with a bit slower, with also a healthy caution. And I think this also makes sense. But I think it's time for these institutions to look at this technology.
I was just looking at your Alliance for Prosperity. I pulled up just one of the graphics here, and I noticed quite a few companies here and projects that we've talked with and also done a lot of research on. Abra, Flexa, Paxful, the Clayton, all of these. When you see this kind of exposure for Celo, I'm surprised that we have not seen more adoption from major organizations, because this is kind of the next generation of both blockchain, but also finance, mobile finance especially. Do you feel like one major adoption would do it to kind of get the existing ecosystem from a banking perspective to really kind of, it just needs one topple to kind of make it move forward and help this industry kind of jump out in front of all this? Do you think that's going to happen soon?
I think that is. One very recent announcement was, for example, around DeFi for the people. Basically, many of the major decentralized finance protocols like Sushi and Aave and others are also coming on to Celo and make use of, as I said, fast transactions and low transaction fees and so on. I think this is a interesting step because this for sure will change the magnitude of liquidity for currencies on Celo. It also will increase the number of or increase interoperability again. It will increase the use cases for different Celo currencies. I think this is a first step. And I think now increased awareness of also the traditional industry. Now, I would guess that every also traditional company is looking at this technology. I think, for example, the purchase of Celo token of Deutsche Telekom was the first time where a traditional company purchased crypto token in significant amounts and in a way that it's directly linked to their core business. Deutsche Telekom and T-Mobile, they are in the business of communication. And they also see that the future of communication is also done or can be done via currencies, can be done in many different ways, also via NFTs, and can be done with the help of blockchain, can be much easier. And therefore, I think therefore this move made a lot of sense also into Celo because it's a mobile-first blockchain. And I really can see going forward more and more companies now look at this and see what is the overlap to my core business and where can I make use of this. And when we talk to traditional financial institutions, of course, they could offer this to their clients. They could be something like a custodian and hold token for their clients as a bank. But they could use also this technology as settlement technology for internal settlement payments. Also, I mentioned this before, the Internet of Things, and every company that is looking into this. Now you could have payments very efficiently, very cheaply on the Celo blockchain be done between machines, triggered by certain conditions, fully automatic. So also this development could consider this, and therefore I see a lot of potential that basically actually now is the time where this switches and where the adoption is quickly growing. And also now we can see in every region of the world, regulators also start and think about that, have to think about that this technology is coming. And basically, of course, the whole industry, every community project that builds something on Celo doesn't want to build around existing
Right.
regulation. It actually want to build something that makes the life easier, more efficient, better, and therefore use this new technology. And I think at some point the regulator then can provide also the framework for this. And here in Europe, the markets in crypto asset regulation framework is currently being worked on. I think it's good to see that also here the regulator is open for technological advancements, and therefore I can see with also increased regulatory coverage, so to say, and clearance and clarity, also companies now are feeling more comfortable to look into this technology.
Yeah, and I think you just hit on my last question, which was the whole regulatory, forecast of where that potentially is going to be going. Obviously, we see a little bit of rub here in the United States with the SEC and some projects that have faced some challenges like XRP and Ripple. And interesting, you talked about settlement, because that has a lot of overlap in what Ripple is trying to do, from a global banking system, and they've been able to successfully do that. What you're talking is really upline one, or downline, I should say, one step for settlements into localized banks, which would really kind of create a new ecosystem connectivity for banking in general. I think that's going to be the big adoption case. I guess for you, Doctor, one last question. If this were to happen in 2022, 23, when do you think we'll see that adoption really start to pick up in the banking systems that we're normally using today?
And actually, to link these 2 points, basically, that when would the adoption also in traditional banking come to basically the regulatory frameworks, I still, and I think everyone working on Celo, the community is a big fan of open source and permissionless networks. I think here, this really makes a difference, because if banks want to adopt this technology, they can, and if it is open source, they can basically very easily look through the documentation of the different blockchains out there. They can go, for example, on docs.celo.org and see what it takes to build an integration into this blockchain, and very quickly bring, for example, their settlement on top of a blockchain like this. And this is true for any other fully decentralized blockchains out there. And I think banks, other institutions, especially in the financial space, haven't been used to open source technology, but the great advantages are, it's basically they can build what they need on top of it. They can also have like regulatory clarity, because they have their core business still regulated, and they use a open source technology as for example a settlement layer, and the other big advantage is they have their technology constantly being further built out, being tested. There's no central point of failure anymore. What we've seen in many instances in the past, that in some region of the world, either like servers were down or a settlement layer at a bank was down, and then basically things didn't work. And with this technology, they can actually go a step further. And I think this is where the adoption will come. And yes, I really see next year we probably will see so many more banks already working with this technology, and looking more intense into these things. If we already have like first banks that fully settle on Celo or another blockchain, let's see, but the potential is there.
Yeah, for sure. Dr. Markus Franke, it's been great having you on the show today. For you guys, of course, if you're sticking around, make sure and stay tuned right here, because we're actually going to do a quick analysis on some of the data we've been watching on Celo, the token, to kind of give you, our audience, a little bit more of insights on that. But Doctor, thanks so much for stopping in. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks for these super interesting questions. This was a lot of fun, and yeah, great work. Looking forward to chat again.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so you guys have stuck around here, and the goal was, one, we wanted to, of course, as you guys know, we bring on people that are really deep into these projects. Obviously with Dr. Frank, a partner at CLabs, he's got privy to a lot of information, but as you saw, really kind of the evolution of where Celo is going. And I wanted to jump to a couple of things. As you saw back on the element of that ecosystem, I want to just jump back to the ecosystem here quickly. And what he was talking about here was that Alliance for Prosperity. This is a very, very key ecosystem that I think is the potential for the next generation in terms of localized mobile payments, especially in some of these unbanked regions. We'll probably start to see that. And what could happen here is where we start to see some of these emerging banks, even here in the United States, that are trying to position a marketing advantage over some of the bigger banks by potentially using something like an open sourced platform for Celo. So let's jump over to the chart real quick. As you see here in September, the scoring there was sentiment 59.91 and amplification 52.06. That dropped a little bit right before we saw the little bit of rise, and typically what you see where sentiment and amplification, where amplification is not necessarily flying very high, it usually means you're going to see a little bit of a spike if it's close, meaning like a 59 and a 58. That would have been a really good score, would have indicated a little bit more of a sustained move for Celo, but that was not the case. We saw a 52 on the amplification, which means short-term rise, and that's exactly what we had over here between September and right here toward September 10th or so. This moved on down, and then we pulled another bubble here on September 11th, and this one goes out through the end of the 11th right here. Amplification still a little bit stronger though, up at 55.01, which told us a little bit of this movement and price action that some of you maybe got a chance to take some profits on if you were out here in this zone, or if you had purchased right here on this sentiment drop, which is a good opportunity. The potential for this project, though, I think is very big. The key here, though, is that not a lot of people really understand the use case applications of Celo in real world. I think as we start to see many of those alliance partners or those partnerships really start to get fully adopted into some of these, not necessarily the unbanked regions, but in some of the first generation banking ecosystem, I think that's where we're going to see a big jump in the Celo ecosystem. Now, would I hold this coin long term? At the price that currently is where it's trading, which is between the $5 and the $4 rate, my point is you're probably good anywhere at $4 is a great entry point. The likelihood is we'll probably see this token move up to as much as $6.50 to as much as $10 by the end of the year. Again, all this will determine a lot of what we see in these altcoins, but primarily because of Celo's utility, speed, and the use case. This is one of those projects that ironically has a lot of similarities to XRP. And in terms of settlement and authentication for the banking system, the difference, XRP has the partnerships already in place. Celo is still in the layer 1 partnerships, meaning next generation finance projects and potentially the emerging banking projects that would be coming. Now, adoption will be key there if the unbanked starts to move in this direction in terms of cross-border payments and things of that nature. So you've got to keep an eye on this one. There are a few tokens that are moving in this direction around mobile payments and really kind of the evolution. I like Celo's ecosystem, and it is one of those projects that I've been following for a long time and have continued to kind of just really understand why and where it's moving. I think the big key here is going to be the key developers that they start and continue to onboard. So that's going to be it for today. We're going to, of course, if you guys are over on the podcast, main thing over there is give us some likes. And by the way, great comments. We loved, I picked up a ton of new comments over on iTunes here recently. So I don't know what happened with iTunes, but all of a sudden we started seeing a lot of traction over there. If you are on the podcast right now, the best thing to do is jump over here to the YouTube channel. You're going to see this chart that I just revealed showing Celo's price action. We are nearing 100,000 subscribers. People, it is close. It is within sight. We want to thank you, our audience, for helping contribute to that. And very soon, We're going to eclipse that, and it's going to be a big day because we're going to be moving into some very interesting things that you don't want to miss here on TechPath and the Paul Barron Network. And that is kind of entering into a new group that we're going to be talking about, releasing some more data. We'll have maybe a Patreon type project we'll start to open up, and a lot more live streaming. So stay tuned right here. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.